Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Okay, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of March 9th. And as many of you know, we are recording it a few days early. So some of the news we'll mention is stuff that is just happening. And hopefully it won't be too out of date by the time you hear it. And it's an honor and a pleasure, and I always say that when he's coming on, the one and only Thom Clark, who once in a while will help host the show. He's certainly an advisor, kind of a producer of the show. And I get him on at least once a month now, talking about all things Thom, what he sees going on out in the world from the local to the global. So hello to you, Thom Clark.
Hello. Having a good day, I hope, Michael.
So far, so good. I did report a little bit earlier about having my car in an accident, but we'll save that we already did it. So there we go. Let's start with the weather. You know, we're here on a Monday, and it's still kind of warm out for wintertime. It just our Sunday was up near 70 degrees. People have been out and about, but you got stuck in a blizzard. Where the hell were you?
Well, we weren't exactly stuck, but we accompanied our granddaughters and their parents to Colorado so that the parents could go skiing and we could spend some quality time with the young girls, 1 and 3. And
Nice.
Our travels went well. They drove out. We flew out in the middle of our stay in the YMCA camp on the skiing side of the mountains out there. Just north of Winter Park, south of Granby. We got hit with a 5-inch blizzard. And I'll tell you, it was really blown, and it reminded me of winters of yore because, boy, we're not having a winter in Chicago. And the same day you were having 70 degrees last week, it was 7 above that evening. Gorgeous sunrises, wonderful moonrises, but we could still see stars. It was really a special time. And
it's nice to be up there and up high, closer to those stars.
I think, as a friend commented, we Flatlanders need to see the mountains every once in a while. We try to get out there about once every 5 years or so because that's another whole country that we're not used to, particularly this non-winter we've had in Chicago.
Yeah, we've had a pretty light winter, except for a few weeks of really cold, and which did bust a couple of my pipes and stuff like that. Anyhow, let's go to something that's not as fun to talk about. There's a guy, the orange-haired guy is been taken off the ballot in a number of states up there in Maine, out there in Colorado, and in Illinois here. But what happened? The news just came in.
Well, the Supreme Court has unanimously rejected the notion that Colorado or any other individual state can keep Trump from being on the ballot. They say that that's a legislative function and it should not be up to each individual state, which would create chaos, or even in this particular decision, up to the court to decide whether or not the former insurrectionist is allowed on the ballot or not. It's not a particularly surprising decision. I guess I was surprised that it was a unanimous decision.
Yeah, me too.
They clearly directed Congress to take care of this. And as we know, Congress can't get much of anything done these days. We're in a week where there are continuing resolutions rather than permanent appropriations. That seems to be an ongoing story with this dysfunctional GOP. And we'll have to see what else Congress finds time for, like impeaching the sitting president with no grounds to do so, while they passed up the opportunity to do it with the insurrectionists.
You know, we tend to have long been critical of a number of things, even when it's the Democrats in power, and we certainly have our criticisms of the current president. But we also know that he's done a lot of things that surprised people, done some really good things. But he keeps getting beat up in the polls, even when the other guys are just stepping in. You know what? We have this situation here where Biden is victimized because of his age when he is only a couple of years older from an erratic former president, the orange-headed guy with the fake suntan stuff on his face, where you could check it out, the line, when they get the camera angle. And what's your take on this age thing? I mean, I'm older than Biden, so I'm sympathetic to watching how he walks sometimes, but I also think he's pretty sharp and he doesn't make, really big mistakes like the orange head guy. I don't like to say his name.
I agree with you entirely. I think that the challenge is ageism is an easy story where journalists don't have to go out and investigate policies or actual record. This President Biden, will be seen by history, I suspect, as the most productive president despite a split Congress since LBJ. That's Lyndon Baines Johnson for you younger listeners and viewers.
LBJ.
And he got bogged down by Vietnam. I'm afraid Joe Biden may get bogged down by his policy towards Israel and the impact on Gaza, though his own vice president over the weekend came out for a ceasefire, which many of us have been calling for because however the tragedy and terrorism of October 6th, the response has been out of proportion to the damage suffered by Israelis with the Hamas raid back in the beginning of October. This kind of police action, we haven't heard that term in recent years, but that's how I view this particular action is in my lifetime, I've never seen any of these kind of disputes ever solved by war. And the devastation that one government has brought on a country in the making in the Gaza Strip that's not much bigger than Chicago and has a very similar size population. 75% of Gazans have been displaced. And also out this morning was news that in the north, which received just incredible bombardments, 25% of the kids are malnourished. I mean, I just think it's time for a lot more than airlifts, which is a very inefficient, expensive way to provide relief. Biden should follow up on his vice president's call for a ceasefire and demand the border be open to let relief trucks come through freely without them being blown up by tanks when they try to provide supplies to really starving, impoverished people at this point who've been pushed all around the place. It's a very sad situation. We saw in the results in Michigan last week, the protest vote for none of the above that happened. That was primarily young Democratic voters and the significant Arab population that's in and around Detroit that basically said, we're not for this sitting president at the moment, given his policies in the Middle East. So Joe Biden's going to have to do something to clean up his act in the next month or two, or he's going to lose Michigan, and he can't afford to lose Michigan.
No, it's a big issue. We got to, and I think there's some people talking about an uncommitted vote here in the primary too. It hasn't taken the same kind of shape that it did in Dearborn, Michigan, but it's on people's minds. Since we were talking about the orange-headed guy, what about his money problems? Because he's been rung up in court a little bit. The cha-chings are going up on what he owes, and he's trying to get out of it in a smaller payment. What do you got on all that and his challenges around money, and maybe the Republican Party's challenge around money?
The alleged genius billionaire now owes about $500 million to two different jurisdictions in New York, and he clearly doesn't have the cash. He complained last week that he was going to have to sell real estate in order to come up with the cash just to pay for a bond, because that's how it works in New York. If you're going to appeal a case, then you have to at least put the money up ahead of time or guarantee that the money will be available should you lose the appeal. Well, he can't even come up with, it's not chump change, it's actually a lot of money, but he can't even come up with the premium cost for a bond, much less actually pay the full amount of these fines. I think the guy's in a lot of trouble, and I think the primaries that he's winning also show weakening support. he has not, in any of these elections as I've observed them, met his polling numbers. He has fallen short when the actual votes are counted. And that's my sliver of hope in this current chaotic environment where we have a real sociopathic autocrat wanting to take over. And he's freely said, I want to end the Constitution. I want to do massive deportation. The list goes on of what he's already said on the record. So to go back to the ageism thing, I don't think the media has paid enough attention to the real threat we face as a not so young democracy anymore, but one the rest of the world is very scared is going the wrong way. And very scared within NATO that we can't even support and back up what we said we'd do in Ukraine. Putin is just chuckling now that his old buddy apparently may have a chance to win again. And all bets are off if that duo gets to run the world. I mean, I imagine even China is concerned about that kind of a dynamic, given some of the challenges they're facing economically. Their vaunted, fast-built middle class is really suffering under wage stagnation and a huge housing crisis. You don't hear about this much because the system is so different, but they have some significant economic challenges, which is probably one reason we're hearing more saber rattling around the Straits of Taiwan, because there's nothing like a war to divert people's attention from reality.
Thom Clark, let me ask you, do you have any take on these polls? I know a lot of people say, don't look at the polls, don't worry about it too much, but we all do. And I wonder if you had, they got these polls showing Orange had a couple of points ahead of Biden. What's your sense of the polls?
Well, first of all, polls at this stage are, again, cheap journalism, not really good reporting, because it's what I call horse race reporting. And there are two things about that. Number one, most voters aren't paying attention to this election right now as yet. In fact, many of them, I'm afraid, are getting tired of the chaos and the charges back and forth. Number two, most of these polls that refer to Trump being ahead by a couple points are national polls, which again are meaningless. This is a democracy that has this odd electoral college way of finalizing the vote for president, and that's a state-by-state vote. And so the really important polls to look at are swing state voters, and as well as trying to determine, again, way far out, we're 10 months away, 9 months away from this election. Most people don't really pay much attention to what they're going to do on election day until after Labor Day. So we have a spring and a summer to get through before we can take these polls really seriously. And the only important polls to look at are the state-by-state results in swing state areas, because that's where the electoral college will be determined.
That's good to hear. One more thing on the kind of national level before we shift a little bit to closer to home. The leader of the Republicans in the Senate is a guy named Mitch McConnell, and he's clearly starting to fall out of favor, and has a riff with Orangehead, but he also has enabled a lot of negative things to happen, and he just decided to not run again, or not always giving up the leadership of the Republicans in the Senate. Any take on him and what might happen and where that's going?
Well, ironically, it's one of the saner things I've ever seen Mitch McConnell do. He can lead pretty well, and he is on the outs with the Magna forces. There's no doubt about that, which is ironic because he basically delivered the Supreme Court to Orangehead, including not letting Barack Obama's last nominee even get a hearing, and then did a speed dating kind of thing with the latest nominee that got in there, the Notre Dame graduate Barrett, who's been kind of quiet since she's been on the court, but she is a freshman justice, and maybe that's best. But she's clearly voting with the conservative majority. I think it's curious again that everybody, including the liberals on the court, voted against this striking Orange Head from the ballot in Colorado, and that will have an effect here in Illinois as well as in Maine. We'll see that whole thing develop. But Mitch McConnell is almost solely responsible for the conservative shift in the courts, not only in the Supreme Court, but on the federal court level, district court level. He got a lot of judges appointed even before Biden came in during the Orange Head's years in office. And he's continued that trend, though a little less so given the nominations that Biden has made. But a lot of those nominations have been held up by Mitch McConnell. And so I think he's been rather spineless in challenging the magna forces of his old party. And I can't blame him for leaving the leadership of really a very chaotic party that has really lost its core principles. Mind you, this is the party of Lincoln, and we know what he did to wage and succeed with the Civil War. Practically all the stuff he stood for back 150 years ago, the current Republican Party has shunned. And I think what's most dangerous is the inward looking, where we want to get rid of all the immigrants who, of course, built this country. We want to align ourselves with other autocrats around the world rather than democratic forces. I mean, these are very dangerous trends that we ought to take seriously and make sure it doesn't happen. We have to make sure every living body turns out to vote.
I would hope that some reason McConnell resigns or something. I don't want to get too far into it, but if it happens before his re-election, or he runs or someone else runs, the governor of Kentucky would appoint somebody. And I do like this guy, Andy Beshear, in Kentucky. I think he's someone to watch.
I agree.
Let's switch. Let's bring it on home. And one of the things that you've been working on, I've been working on, a lot of people in the neighborhood, particularly in Network 49, is Bring Chicago Home. And Bring Chicago Home will tax a real estate transfer tax over $1 million on one-time sale of a building. That money would go into a fund that would deal with homelessness in the city. And we need to deal with homelessness throughout the nation. But we had a situation where they've got some legal trouble now. What happened?
Well, without getting into the legal morass, the real estate interests with a lot of money behind them successfully challenged the way this referendum was posed. And the basic problem with the language in the referendum is that it calls for both a decrease in the basic tax rate for most of us homeowners, as well as a tiered increase for more expensive homes and property. And it's really the downtown office building and larger developer of shopping centers or Amazon warehouses that were very opposed to this because, again, that one-time sale means that they will pay a higher rate on the real estate transfer tax, which was seen by this 10-year campaign by the Coalition for Homeless as one of the best ways to have a dedicated fund to deal with this continuing big problem in our town, aggravated by the so-called migrant crisis. Some of those folks are trying to use the same beds to get shelter overnight. And while we've had a relatively mild winter, anything below 40, it's not very nice to have to stay out in. Plus, it would fund a lot of necessary needed supportive services, possibly even reopening some of those mental health clinics that were closed an administration ago. So I think the initiative is important for all of us to still vote on, if for no other reason to send a message about how we're willing to adjust this basic real estate transfer tax issue to make it more progressive and to help directly fund homeless programs.
One other thing that I want to bring up is the election. We have an election coming up real soon, and you can actually vote now, everybody. one of the candidates for the state's attorney position, now held by Kim Foxx, a true progressive, is open. She's not rerunning. And the Democratic Party has endorsed a fellow named Clayton Harris over a former judge named, I think it's Eileen.
Yes.
There's some debate going on around who to support on that. And at first, I was leaning toward Burke after I saw our friend Don Rose come out and support her, saying that she had taken on the Catholic Church over sex allegations, et cetera, et cetera. Then our Democratic Ward Committee woman and also our state representative, Kelly Cassidy, put out a very detailed letter about how Burke had prosecuted a 5-year-old on a case, and it was pretty horrendous. Other people I know have talked to people who have a lot of favorable things to say about Harris. Today, I noticed that Julie Hamos, a former state senator who tends to be progressive, she came out for Burke. And I'm just wondering what your take is on the state's attorney race, what you know and what you might want to share.
Well, I'm a little surprised this race hasn't gotten more attention, given all the attention that Ms. Fox got during her 2 terms in office. Having said that, this is a case where I think it's important to follow the money. Very conservative Republican donors are the ones supporting Burke's campaign. It's one reason we're getting so many glossy 4-color brochures in the mail supporting.
And TV ads up the waz.
And you need to look at who is funding that effort. Clearly, they're scared of the independence Clayton Harris would bring to the office, are afraid of another progressive prosecutor in that office, and they're supporting with millions of dollars this former judge's campaign. So I urge people to pay attention to Clayton Harris for state's attorney and to ignore the advertising for Miss Burke.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm with you on that. One sad note, and I guess we'll finish up on that unless we'll have a little finale of happiness maybe. But up in our neighborhood at Potawatomi Park, where a lot of us have gone over the years to vote or participate in various things going on, there was a shooting just the other day. I think one woman was killed and 3 people were wounded. Apparently the shooters were after somebody in the group. The young woman who passed was a visitor from Minnesota. I think her name was Keontae Gladney, and she was only 19. Any thoughts on this?
Well, it's another sad example about how we have too many guns in our society and in our neighborhood. Disputes that might have been settled with fists or a knife when we were growing up are now settled not just by a pistol, but by automatic weapons. And it follows the tragedy outside Senn High School just a few weeks ago. And the immediate neighbors in both cases are just baffled and saddened and scared, in all honesty. There was a quiet vigil on behalf of primarily the staff who particularly felt this. The shooting took place behind their field house. It was a wonderful ceremony that I think helped the staff understand that there were neighbors who were supporting them in their grief and their sorrow over what happened. But we have a bigger ongoing story to deal with in trying to get rid of automatic weapons from our society.
You know, it was a moving ceremony. It was a number of people, and they had a prayer or a peace circle. I was there, and a lot of candles, and it was just another sad occasion. But it was good that some people came out to show their respect and their hopes for something different. We're out of time, Thom, unless you got some little upbeat words of enthusiasm or excitement that you want to share.
Well, I will just say that Rogers Park knows how to take care of its own. And like other crises in the past, the mutual aid that we're able to bring together to support people in grief, I think is a telling element of our neighborhood and something we should be proud of, even when it's over a sad issue.
Thom, it's always great to talk to you and to see you. Sometimes I see you in person, sometimes it's over to Zoom. Keep doing good in the world.